This is a special podcast presentation from 700WLW.com. This is Doc Thompson On Demand.
The better word is marketing. For years, people have used the word spin. Oh, that's political spin. They're just spinning. It's the no spin zone. Spin doctors. It's marketing. That's something we're used to. You understand it? You've been marketed to your entire life. Your entire life, people have marketed to you. You create a problem, then you tell people what the solution is. Your entire life, and it's gotten more pronounced throughout your life. More and more advertising everywhere you go. You've been marketed to. That's what's going on all the time. Political issues and politicians, they're marketing to you. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. One of the most successful right now that's going on, that is playing out before our eyes, is the union speak. When they would have you believe that only union workers are middle class and only union workers are workers. I mentioned that yesterday. I had a guy on, and the whole thing was, well, the middle class, they're killing the middle class. This is an assault on the middle class. It's an assault on the working man. I'm middle class. I'm a working man. Maybe not physical. Is that what you're talking about? Well, guess what? Teachers aren't physical manual labor people. That's one of the marketing examples that have been going on for a long time. They've spun what the middle class is. Well, the middle class is a lot more than what they would have you believe. Joining me now is Jim Kenna. He is the author of We've Been Had, How Obama and the Radicals Conned the Middle Class. Jim, I think the first way they've conned us is by trying to tell us who is and who isn't the middle class.
Well, yeah, I think that's an important point, and thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely.
I mean, the middle class is the heart and soul of this country, and to the point you were just making, it has nothing to do with who's in a union or who's not in a union. In fact, only 14% of the working people in America are in a union right now, and more than half of that number are government union workers. So the real production that goes on in America, the real things that are produced of value, are generally made by non-union people.
So how have they conned us? How have they conned the middle-class Americans?
Well, in a couple of ways. When you look at just the face of it, the federal government, for instance, 20% of our gross national product flows through Washington right now, and that's not including defense spending. And when you think about it as a middle-class citizen, what do you really get for having 20% of your gross national product, of our cumulative wealth, going through Washington? It goes through a bunch of lobbyists, bureaucrats, crony capitalists. It gets sent to a lot of very wealthy people in bailouts. You know, trillions went to AIAG and the banks and Fannie and Freddie, and bailing out auto companies and all of the consultants that work for the government, and even the federal government employees themselves tend to be somewhat well off. There's 380,000 government workers, federal government workers, who make over $100,000 a year. So there's all this transfer of wealth going to some very wealthy people through the federal government, and a lot of transfer of wealth going to some poor people. But what comes back to the middle class from all of this? We've got this $3.7 trillion monstrosity in Washington, and what really comes back to the middle class from that? It's been a massive con, and we've all been led into believing that the sun won't come up tomorrow unless we send an enormous truckload of money to Washington.
I think there has been an attack on the middle class for a long, long time, and unfortunately, people haven't seen what's going on because of the marketing that I mentioned. For example, throughout the last, 2008 election in particular, the president and a lot of people kept talking about the middle class and how they're in it for the middle class. Did they ever mention the lower class? Nobody likes to consider themselves lower class. They kept saying middle class. Meanwhile, they heaped more and more pressure, responsibility, and taxes on the middle class, taking away more jobs from the middle class. Now, those rich people that they like to, vilify, they're taken care of. They may not have as much money, but they're fine. So we don't have to worry about them. The lower class people who don't want to be called lower class, everyone thinks they're middle class. Those lower class people are taken care of as well because of all of these entitlement programs. They don't pay any taxes. They frequently get tax rebates even though they don't pay anything. They get handouts. They get entitlements. They get welfare. They get all of these things. It's the middle class who have been shouldering the load for decade after decade after decade. And I think what's happened, Jim, is you've seen more of them say, why am I the fool? Why am I the one that's going out doing this when I see that guy not working and he's getting? And they've slowly said, I'm not going to do it anymore, and some of their jobs have been killed off.
Yeah, my book goes through this in some detail because you talk about the marketing of this, and there actually is a very clear strategy by the radicals on the left, and it started with Saul Alinsky. And he had the recognition that if we were ever going to have a socialist movement in the United States, the middle class had to be conned into supporting it because it wouldn't be something they would naturally do. And the way you con the middle class into doing that is to convince them that the world is about to crumble around them, so they need to embrace big government to save them somehow. So we've gone through these series of crises over the last 30 or 40 years, the poverty crisis, the energy crisis in the 70s, and lately we've had the banking crisis, the global warming crisis, the economic crisis, the healthcare crisis. And oh, by the way, the solution for all of them is always bigger government, higher taxes, more intrusion in your life, and less freedom. And it's gradually eroding the wealth and the liberty of the middle class. And it's been a conscious strategy by the left for 40 years now, and a very successful one.
Yeah, they have basically, and I think it is their goal to create two classes. If their goal is really this socialist utopia that they like to talk about and try to drive us to, well, we all know throughout history there's not one class when you try socialism. There's not everybody having the same. There is most people having not enough. And then there are a few that are a little more equal because they've got to move into the farmer's house and run everything just in the interim. So what they've done is, I think, continue to drive the middle class away, either into the lower or upper socioeconomic class, and create that two-class system. But the incredibly evil and wonderful, if you are somebody who supports this, ingenious thing about it is they've done it by pretending that they are actually supporting and promoting the middle class.
Yeah, and that's part of the con, and why the title of my book refers to that activity of con is that politicians need the middle class to support them in order to get elected, because that's where most of the voters are. And so you'll always hear that they're going to do something for the middle class. But when you step back and look at it, well, what is that? And even if they do manage to throw a few programs toward the middle class, or maybe a minor tax cut here or there, if you examine the federal government and how it's financed right now, it's very clear that the middle class is going to be destroyed down the road. Because even this year's budget, which they claim has a lot of cuts in it or whatever, which is nonsense, but that $3.7 trillion budget, it has $1.6 trillion of borrowed money in it. That's 40% of our operating budget this year is being borrowed. And if you flip that around, to balance that budget this year, we would have to raise taxes on everybody across the board, 75%, just to balance this year's budget. At some point in time, this disaster is going to come to haunt every American, and it's going to haunt the middle class in particular, because the poor aren't going to pay for it,
right?
And the rich can't pay for it in totality.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you're right with that. I think it hits first with the middle class, secondarily with the lower and then upper class, and I think that's where we're at right now. I think it is starting to hit the middle class. This is, maybe the canary in the mine, where so many people in the middle class are saying, guess what, I don't have money now. I'm, on some entitlement program. I'm in welfare, whatever. My job's gone. I think that's the beginning of it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you're starting to see, as you say, that canary in the coal mine at the state and local level, because they can't do what the federal government can do. The federal government can basically borrow money with impunity, and if they can't borrow it, they can simply print it, which the Federal Reserve does with its quantitative easing programs. But at the state and local level, you're now seeing reality push back. The money doesn't exist, and all of these things that we've promised ourselves and other people simply can't be paid for. And the middle class is going to take it on the chin. They've all been lied to for decades by their politicians. Even when you look at Social Security, there's nothing there. They claim that there's $2.7 trillion in the trust fund. It doesn't exist. It's all been loaned to the general fund of the federal government and spent on all these other entitlements and all these bailouts to other entities. There is no Social Security money. It does not exist. You are
an original Tea Party activist?
Yeah, I joined the movement right after Rick Santilli's famous rant, and we started a group in Plymouth, Michigan, and it's been an absolute blast ever since then. We believe we've had a profound impact on politics in America.
I see a lot of speculation right now in the future of the Tea Parties because they've been, well, not quiet, but they certainly aren't as vocal right now after the election. People are saying, well, that's the end of it. I remember April 15th, the first big Tea Party day. And the next day after having gone to a big Tea Party rally, it was huge. People standing in rain at the one I was at. I said, well, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but this is the type of thing that many of you have been asking for years when you say, when is somebody going to do something? When is somebody going to stand up and do something? I said, well, that day was yesterday. I don't know if people are going to continue it, but I gave my prediction, and it seems to be true thus far, that people would be very active up through the last election. It would die down just a little bit, and then it would get really big again, 2012, because they want to see Obama gone. But my fear is after 2012, it goes away.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. And being very active in the movement right now, you are seeing a quieter movement, but I wouldn't confuse that for no activity because the movement's actually sinking deeper into the political process. You know, for instance, I'm stunned at how many Tea Party members have become precinct delegates in the Republican Party, and how many have decided to run for office, and how many successfully ran for office in 2010 at the state and local level. You saw a lot of the national ones, but we've had some very, very successful activity at the local level with our Tea Party members. We've got a lot of educational seminars going on. Every month I speak at Tea Party groups talking about the various radical movements that are moving through our society. We talk about constitutional issues. There's a lot of activity going on in the Tea Party movement. It's all very healthy activity and very powerful activity. And I would agree with you that as 2012 comes near, we're going to see a more visual eruption of that activity.
Are the old school Republicans, the old guard, are they getting it? I mean, I know they are afraid of the Tea Party. They never admit that, because then that makes them look weak. Are they gonna go away? Are they gonna adapt to some of the Tea Party stuff? Or are they just gonna keep on keeping on?
Well, my belief is a lot of them are going to be casualties because I think the Tea Party movement has to infiltrate the Republican Party and basically take it over and become its heart and soul. I mean, let's face it, we're the heart and soul of the Republican Party anyway. But I was stunned about a year ago. I talked to a lot of Tea Party groups as I go around the country, and I talked to a Republican group. And it was an entirely different meeting. They were so caught up in this silly protocol and petty business, and they didn't even have a sense of the revolution that was unfolding around them. And I'm afraid that there is an old guard that's simply going to be pushed out of the way, and it's probably a good thing.
I think the guys in charge right now in Congress certainly are in the House, Eric Cantor and John Boehner. I think they are absolutely the old guard who's not necessarily getting it. We shall see how that whole thing ends up playing out.
Yep. And, and I'm disappointed, too. I'm disappointed with everybody in Washington, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, whatever they call themselves, because for them to stand up and say they're making deep cuts this year and they're cutting to the bone, and when, in fact, our budget this year is basically the same as last year. They essentially haven't cut anything. The few programs they've cut out have been replaced by other programs, or the cuts are really referencing some future program that's being eliminated. They've done nothing to fundamentally address the issue, and it has to change.
Yeah, if we ran our houses the way they run the stuff where you just say, well, you know what? I'm overspending by, 20%, 50%, whatever. I'll make it up next year. And you just keep doing this. We wouldn't be around. But somehow they keep talking. Well, it's so difficult to balance the budget. It's not difficult. Here's what you have to spend. It's your job as congressmen and senators to say where you're going to spend the amount you have and only spend what you have.
And I think they've refused to take a zero-based look at the federal government. I mean, there's very basic questions we need to ask. Why do we need a Department of Education at the federal level?
We don't.
That's a matter that can be handled at the community level and the state level. There's nothing about it that requires involvement by the federal government. Completely eliminate the Department of Education. And that's just an example. There's nothing to be gained by this money we're sending to Washington.
The book is We've Been Had, How Obama and the Radicals Conned Middle-Class America. The author is Jim Kenna. And, Jim, I have a link at my blog, 700WLW.com. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Have a great day. The blog brought to you by the American Trading Company. Your calls coming up just after 11 o'clock. We're also going to discuss Deep Thoughts with Charlie Sheen. 700 WLW. Fox 19 Storm Tracker forecast for meteorologist Frank Marzullo. You got mostly sunny skies this afternoon, high around 50. Clear tonight and an overnight low around 25. It's 42 right now at the big one. All right, big protest yesterday, the largest one yet at the State House. Estimates 10,000 union supporters. About half of that last week. The committee vote was postponed until today, so we should have some sort of committee vote from the Senate today. It's already passed in the House. There have been some amendments that have gone out and then been restored. Senator Shannon Jones's limited collective bargaining rights part were restored for state, university, local government, and public school employees. I'll give you some of the X's and O's about what's in it right now. These are the amendments in the latest version of Senate Bill 5. It allows contracts with public employee unions to be reopened in cases of fiscal emergency or watch. Another amendment, it allows collective bargaining rights for state employees on wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment within limits. Bases future pay increases on merit and keeps those merit raises within established pay ranges. It'll cap vacation leave at 5 weeks a year after 19 years of service, as opposed to 6 weeks a year after 24 years. It caps annual sick leave at 10 days. It would identify areas not subject to collective bargaining, like health care benefits, pension pickups, privatization of services, workforce levels like such as maximum class size for teachers, stuff like that. Other changes in the pages of amendments to Senate Bill 5, it'll set public employee ranges. The amendment reinstates pay ranges, but not step value and automatic increases, which is in current law. Employees' pay are based upon merit within the ranges set in statute. Merit shall be the only basis for an employee's progression through the schedule. How do you argue that? Certainly with teachers. I know merit is a difficult thing to determine. How do you judge a teacher? Well, if you're a salesman, you can judge them by the amount of sales or the amount of money they make in sales. With a teacher, how do you do it? As I've said, there's a lot of things that go into it. You can't base it just on test scores. You can't just base it on graduation rates. It's got to be a lot of things. But when it's said and done, the ultimate merit should be decided by the supervisors. Because even if you're a salesman and your merit is based on how many sales you make or how much money in sales you bring in, it's still up to your supervisor. And I know the union people hate that. They talk about all of this corruption and graft that could happen with bosses. Well, they're going to play favorites and they're going to whatever. Welcome to the rest of the world. That's how it is everywhere else. Even if a salesman has a merit-based pay, where it is based on the amount of sales and the amount that he brings in, those things change all the time. I've known salesmen for years around radio stations who come in one day and they're suddenly ticked off. Why are you ticked off? Well, they changed what our ranges are and the percentages we're going to get and how much we have to sell in order to hit our goals. That's with sales. That's a pretty easy one to determine success. Listen, if you're a salesman, your job is to sell, to bring in the bacon, to bring in the clients. That's a pretty easy one. But in the private sector, even salesmen have to deal with that, something that is very easy to determine what is merit. So teachers, you're going to have to do the same thing, or you should. Your merit should take into account all of those things. The success of the students on many levels. And when it's all said and done, it's going to have to come down to your supervisors. It certainly should. Your supervisor should say, yes, we think this thing that Sue's doing a good job, Bill's not. Here's how good of a job. Here's where Bill needs to improve. You have performance reviews like the private sector. I'm not suggesting you do that overnight because there's some people who've been there a long time and their seniority, their pay is based on seniority, and they're counting on that. They're not going to be able to get another job to make it up in the short term that they have left in their work cycle, in their work life. But down the road, it should be phased out, and it has to be based on what the supervisors say. And those supervisors are then also held accountable to who? The superintendent and the school board. And the school board and superintendent are held accountable to who? They're held accountable to the voters. It does work. It works in the rest of the world. It works in the private sector. It's Doc Thompson, 700 WLW. Doc Thompson at 700 WLW. Coming up on the big show with Bill Cunningham this afternoon at 106, your dinner is about to cost a whole lot more. Bill will give you the details on 700 WLW. One of the things that I find so frustrating that's going on with this entire discussion of unions and that are the people that are playing the politics. No, I've slammed Bill's sights on the entire thing. Democrats are no better on this thing, continuing that marketing idea that you're attacking the middle class and all of this stuff to continue their agenda. Meanwhile, they have added to this problem. Did you misspend all of this money for decades and decades? Well, yeah, we should have voted in better people. So it is partially our fault. But who has made the bad budget choices? Who has not done their job to protect jobs in the country and in Ohio, the tri-state? Those people that have been there a long time. One of the ones that absolutely sets me off is Senator Capri Cafaro. She is from the Youngstown area, Mahoning County. She went on the offensive about this. She said that the new provisions banning strikes by public employees, including teachers and that, she said it's a bad idea that has gotten worse. Senate Bill 5. She said the amended bill strips public employees of any means to effectively bargain and would put them in jail if they strike. She then went on to say things like, public employees in Ohio didn't cause our budget problems and they shouldn't be blamed for something that's not their fault. Are you willing to be blamed, Capri? See, Capri's out there as this champion. She's putting herself out there like a champion of the lower class and the middle class, these hard-working people. Do you recognize the name Cafaro? She's rich. Her family is loaded. They have the malls and all of the strip malls, the development. Now, there's nothing wrong with having money. I'm not saying you have to vilify somebody because of it. She has money, good for her. Not even jealous. Good. But don't come out there as some champion of the downtrodden or the poor when she could simply give up what she has. Couldn't she live more modestly? Couldn't she take her trust funds or the money that was given to her by her family, the money that she's going to be receiving, already is received? Couldn't she be giving that away? Couldn't she give up her, I'm sure, house, expensive house, car, all of these things? Couldn't her family just hand over money to people? Think about it. If she really wants to help people, why wouldn't she just help them? Give them some of your money. Imagine if she took $1 million of her dollars or her family's dollars and she said, I'm going to give 10 people $100,000. I don't know about you, but $100,000 would change my life. I bet there's a lot of you that $100,000 would change your life. You can buy a house, a nice house, have it paid off. Then what do you need for income? Most of the thing we spend our money on is either rent or a mortgage. Most of our income goes to stuff like that. If she said, I'm going to give $200,000 to 5 people, you buy yourself a nice, modest $150,000 house, you got $50,000 more dollars left over. I don't see her doing that. She ran for Congress, not the state representative. I'm talking Congress. She ran for it's the Senate. It's the congressional district that is held currently by Steve LaTourette, the Republican, in the same area up there. She ran against him a few elections back. And she essentially, being the rich girl, is just trying to buy herself an election. And eventually, if she keeps at it, she will end up in Congress. She realized after she got her name out there running, people usually lose their first time. She goes back, runs at the state level, has made her way to the Senate now. and is continuing to play that class warfare. This is what is amazing to me. Some of the people that are playing the class warfare are rich people. And the middle class, the lower class, buy into it that they're in it for them. They play the class warfare. They're rich. How come nobody calls them on that? I'm the only one that ever brings that up. How are you in it for the little guy when you could simply take care of the little guy? You know, my belief is the government needs to leave us alone. Let me keep what I have, personal responsibility. But I personally believe that is my responsibility to help my fellow man, not via government rules, regulations, and redistribution of wealth, but me personally, volunteering and donating, which I do. There's consistency. Capri, Cafaro, and all the way up through Congress, the people who always want to wrap themselves in the middle class and the low class, telling you how they're in it for them, the working man, bringing jobs back, building it up so people have more. All of this stuff is simply smoke and mirrors. They're rich. They could be giving up what they have, but they don't. On the contrary, they try to make more like those evil rich CEOs, but nobody calls out the politicians, certainly not the politicians on the left that are stockpiling money. Nobody calls them out. They're in it for the little guy. No, they're in it for themselves. They continue to try to further their career, step after step after step, whether it's applying or running for higher office, or eventually leaving and sitting on a board somewhere. Are they hanging out in the slums? Are they walking the earth like Mother Teresa? Are they hanging out in the poor areas every night? No. They're having dinner with heads of states, heads of companies, CEOs, other rich people. They're not hanging out with them. They're not giving up their money. That's their marketing of themselves. And there are a whole lot of people that buy it. There are a whole lot of people that believe their BS about this. Oh, they're in it for it. They're rich. I don't have a problem that they're rich. Fine, you have money, I don't. Good for you. I don't covet it. I don't want what you have. I just want to keep what I have and what I earn. And I want you to be honest. I want you to be straightforward. Stop marketing yourself as the champion of the downtrodden. If you really were, you'd be driving a 4-year-old car, living in a modest house like the rest of us. Instead of just trying to continue your career, continue to make more money and have more power. Capri, Cafaro, smoke and mirrors. It's not real. It's fake. It's Doc Thompson, 700 WLW.
Life is hard on your feet. Union loafers make work easy. You paid your dues. Now relax comfortably. And with a fresh bailout from the Obama administration, we're proud to announce the latest styles of Union loafers are now available in an amazing variety of overpriced styles, colors, and healthcare options. When your feet need a break every 10 minutes, only genuine card-carrying Union loafers will do. To surround yourself with Union loafers, see the shop foreman nearest you. Open 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. Closed all federal, state, and any religious holiday. Closed for lunch 12 to 1. When it comes to the best loafers, look for the Union label.